In most programming languages, you have the option of arrays. Arrays are a group of objects that are stored within a particular array. In Python, this is actually called lists. So let's look at how we can actually create a list of objects. One thing to note is that when you have a list of objects, the first position is position 0, and then moving up from to 1 and then 2. So always remember the first object in that particular array or list is numbered 0, and I'll show you how that works now. So let's look at how we can create a simple array. We will create something with a few different objects within that array. Now, arrays are used for things later on where we can do some port scanning and to track the host and the different port numbers, etc. And that's why this is an important lesson to see exactly how we can use arrays effectively. Let's now look at a simple example before we move on to some more complex examples. In this example, we are going to use a list of different numbers to start with. So simply define a variable. In this instant, we will use something called list var. So we type in list var equals, and then we want a group of numbers. So equals, we use the square brackets, and then we start with numbers like 1 to 6. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And I'll explain exactly how these numbers work shortly and how we can reference them with further functions. So open square brackets and the numbers 1 separated by commas, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Now that we've got the array or list created, we want to print one number from that list. So we print list var, and then we open brackets and we select the position. So in this instant, we'll use 0, which is the first number in that list. So make sure to remember to use the square brackets around the position number and then normal brackets around the list variable, so that when it prints that particular position. So we have position 0 here. It should find the number 1, as we'll see in the results. As we can see here, it has returned the value 1, which is the first position 0. If I was going to change this to find the last one, for example, the last number, I change that to 5. And if I run this, it now should give us the value 6, which is the last number in that particular list. We can also do an iteration where we can pick some numbers from a range. So let's type in a variable letter, for example. Let's use I for I, and let's look at it being in a range, and let's call it 0, 5, which will then give us all the positions in that list. I need to add a colon at the end of this line to make sure there's no errors. And we want to then print, open brackets, list var, and let's put in the square brackets for the variable I. Now, when I run this, it should give us a list of the values from that particular list. So you'll see 1 through to 5 appear here, which shows that it is working. So in this simple example, we've looked at a list of integers. Now let's look at how we can store a list of strings. To do that, we need to add a few additional things like single quotes. And let's go in and type in a variable name. Let's use list str to store strings, and we'll use just a couple letters, A and B. So list str equals, we still use the square brackets, but what we do with the letters in this instance, we want to put the letters in single quotes. So If we want to store A and B, we just type in A in single quotes, comma, B in single quotes, which then gives us the option of having two basically strings in an array. So A in single quotes, comma, B in single quotes. And then to print that, we need to use the command list string, or liststr, in square brackets, select the position number for that particular value that we want. And we do need to hit the print button or type in print before that. Let's run this program now, and it should give us a result of the letter A and also B in this case. Let's do B. As you can see here, it has found the second position for us. There is another more complex example of arrays in Python, and this time we use a dictionary. So to do that, we can type in list dict in this particular example, and we want to store a list of user IDs against a name, for example. In practice, we could use something like this to store the host computer name and the port numbers or the vulnerabilities found, or we could use it to store usernames and then their user ID or usernames against their real names. So what we need to do though is just to understand the way to write the code. You type in list dict equals, you need to use curly brackets in this instance. So you use curly brackets and then close those curly brackets, and within the actual brackets we need to type in the values, and we have to remember we need key values and the key has to be unique. We'll go through this in more detail in a future lesson. I just want to show you how this works for now, so we can actually retrieve some data from a dictionary. So I had made a small error in the actual code, so I just stopped the video and I've restarted it. But as you can see here, I've got list dict, curly brackets open, and then I've got name, test1, UID. So in this instance, I've got name in single quotes, colon, and then the actual value for it. And here I've got UID equals 27, just using a colon between that. Then I've got name 2. I'll put that in single quotes again and give that a value with a colon. And let's call this test2. And then I also have to give the UID to a number. And let's call that number 28. Again, put the single quotes around it and a colon with the value 28. Then I've also got in the next line for k, comma v, two variables, list dictionary items, and then print k and v. So basically assigning k and v the dictionary items, the name test1 and UID 27, and then the name test2 with the UID 28. And when I print that, it then prints those values to the screen. So this is how we use a simple dictionary. We'll go into more detailed examples as we will be creating a port scanner using the Nmap module that we had loaded in earlier. So we will actually build a specific port scanner in Python. So you'll exactly see how I'm able to create that port scanner, a simple port scanner with Nmap module in Python. So as you can see, we have learned so far quite a bit in Python, a very brief overview of things like how to define values, how to define variables, how to do mathematical operations, the if statement, the else if, the else statement. We've looked at how to print to the screen. We have looked at for and while loops. We've looked at lists and arrays. And now we'll move on to actually creating our very first port scanner using the Nmap module.